All right. Howdy, everyone, and welcome to the CD CART User Forum 2025. My name is Christy McKinley, and I serve as the National Conservation Desktop Team Lead for the NRCS National Headquarters. All right, we'll have Eric go ahead and switch us to slide number 3. Today, we're going to learn about CART assessments, CART reports, how CART uses soils data, and how to generate soils maps and reports. So we have a great session for you, hopefully a lot of new things as well as things you may have heard about. One thing, I guess, if you see things that are new or different from in your state, if you have questions, please reach out to your state business tools or local business tool specialist. All right, next slide. So we do have 6 user forums planned in 2025 based on the requested topics from 2024. We also, in this year, you're going to see in the Q&A, we want to capture your attendance. So if you wouldn't mind, please fill out the Microsoft attendance form that'll be posted in the Q&A chat. All right, now I'd like to turn it over to Eric McTaggart, Acting Conservation Planning Branch Chief, NRCS National Headquarters.
All right, thank you so much, Christy. Hello, good morning, good afternoon to the respected parts of the United States and territories. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for everything you're doing out there day in and day out to support the mission of the agency. Today, I'm going to be able to walk through for you a deeper look, a recap of the assessment within CART. And what we're going to walk through is just that typical workflow that was set up within the system. We're going to look at some user interface features, the correlation of the assessment with the conservation planning process, the assessment methodologies, we'll touch on those and resources to look at those further, assessment results, how those are calculated. We'll walk through an example, the ability to do overriding results, and then also how the assessment can impact ranking. So first and foremost, I think this comes to no surprise to all of us, but as field level folks within NRCS, we provide that one-on-one personalized assistance. It all starts with the land. Each piece of land is unique, as well as that client has their uniqueness of their operation, whether it be raising livestock, row production, vegetable production, forestry, grazing, wildlife habitat. You all are providing that unique one-on-one personalized assistance, and we built the system to support all those situations and allow you as those technical users to interface with CD and CART to be able to capture that conservation planning with those individuals. So as I mentioned previously, it all starts with the land. And first we start off, if you weren't aware, within Conservation Desktop. This is where we're going to define at least one planning land unit, and that's necessary to be able to interact with CART. But within Conservation Desktop, as we set those PLUs, keep it technically focused, right from NPPH, which is our National Planning Procedures Handbook. That PLU is a unique geographical area defined by a polygon that is a common land use and is owned and operated or managed by the same client or clients. You will not see guidance in regards to setting a PLU programmatically. This is a technical decision. This is our minimum unit of planning, again, derived from the National Planning Procedures Handbook, if you wish to do some additional reading on that. And then also a key point is that the PLU, our planning land unit, can deviate from FSA's common land unit known as the CLU. We've seen some extreme cases where based on geographical needs of the land, FSA may have divided a 300-acre field into, upwards of 400 to 500 individual CLUs, but it's all managed the same. It's all one land use, all managed the same. So in situations like that, feel free to work with your states on guidance, but we can group CLUs into larger planning land units. So those PLUs that we create will ultimately feed into the assessment. I promised you in the kind of opening agenda that we'll see where these 9 steps of our planning process. 7 of those are contained within the assessment. We start off with steps 1 and 2, identifying those problems and opportunities and determining objectives. We started within CD to really identify what land are we working with, and you can see that being carried over within the assessment. And then also, besides the land, we have the land use, those POU modifiers, and resource concerns to round out steps 1 and 2. As we move into steps 3 and 4 of inventory and resources, analyzing the resource data, this is where we start to capture what existing practices are taking place on the landscape. Also, we answer the resource inventory questions based on the resource concerns we identified earlier. And then there's another step you can see kind of highlighted or grayed out there called a detailed assessment. We'll go over that as well, but it's a way to do some additional analysis of a resource concern. And then we'll round out steps 5, 6, and 7 as we formulate alternatives and evaluate them and make a decision by utilizing the plan practice step and also evaluating the results. So looking a little bit deeper at that land use modifiers, I did mention that it's a technical determination. Definitions for all our land uses and modifiers are housed within the National Planning Procedures Handbook. We determine this is also important as you build this. This is going to be your foundation. It's looking at determining the applicability of our resource concerns and practices. This is not only within the software, but also within policy for our resource concern and planning criteria, national instruction, or if you look at practice standards, they're going to talk about applicability. And then our resource inventory questions are tied to this within CART. So you need to have the proper land use and sometimes the proper modifier to see a certain question. And then also likewise, as you're setting things within your land use modifiers like irrigated, those can have impacts on the thresholds of the resource concern, either moving a resource concern threshold higher or potentially lower. As we work in the process, on the bottom of the screen, you can see what step we're at within CART. Now we're within the resource concerns. Again, you can hit the add resource concern button, but really want to talk about the question we get often is what are the sources to identify the resource concerns that you should be evaluating within the field. Obviously, our client objective is going to be a big part of that equation. They may not speak in the terms of our resource concerns. However, they're going to express what their needs are for their operation, and then we can convert those into our scientific technical understanding of resource concern components. We may do a field visit where we identify issues that we need to bring to the client's attention, but also within, we're going to have our local work groups, state technical committees, and national guidance that could provide understanding of working with a client in a certain geographical area, whether it be a watershed, a county level, within a national priority landscape project. That would also guide what resource concerns we would need to evaluate. So try to keep those as technical as possible. And then programmatically, CSP will interject some requirements, as you are aware, if you've worked with CSP for a certain set of resource concerns that must be evaluated to support determination of stewardship eligibility and calculation of those existing activity payments. Just to highlight on the resource concern page, there's another tab. We were previously looking at the add resource concern, but review by practice. It requires you to go further in the planning process within the assessment and already have identified your plan practices. But if you've done that, you can hit this tab up here called review by practice, and you can see the resource concerns that a particular plan practice can address, and you can hit the plus button to add it to a particular land unit. If you want to remove it, the negative sign will remove the association to that PLU. Touching briefly on our thresholds, we have 2 types of thresholds. So our standard thresholds are set at a value of 50. So there at the bottom of the screen, my example for you all is within the standard threshold for degraded plant condition, plant structure, and composition being the resource concern component. All those will have a set value of 50. That it does not deviate from that. It's just evaluation of is there a concern or not. However, we have other ones that are dynamic based on site-specific situations, whether that be the weather, like rainfall amount or soil characteristics. And later on, Jason Nemechek's going to show you a little bit additional information on how that works for our dynamic thresholds. But you can see here for sheet and rill erosion, you can go as low as 10. If you have a real erodibility index of low and your R factor is low, you could be up 10, but you could see the maximum we could reach for sheet and rill erosion is 80. This would be one where if we have an irrigation modifier, you're going to input the total amount of irrigation taking place, which will influence the adjustment. There's further information within the resource assessment document that goes into details on that. So it is important to capture that inventory appropriately. Lastly, just to show you, there's about 18 dynamic thresholds for resource concern components, and then that leaves all the others to be a standard 50 set threshold. This is a view within CART where we do configuration. Jared Kneisel, who you'll hear from here in a moment, leads that effort. As we move on to steps 3 and 4, we're looking at those existing practices. We have two types of existing practices. We have historical. So you can see that in the screenshot up at the top. It's pulled from the National Planning and Agreement Database, NPAD. And if there's a practice up here in the historical view, that would be either the practice was applied and we're aware of it, or it's planned and under contract. So another key piece of information is this single PLU that's highlighted on the left, as you are aware, is contained within a practice schedule. But when we are looking at whether or not there are historical practices within NPAD, we are evaluating that PLU identifier throughout the entirety of NPAD, and anywhere we have stored information of applied or planned and under contract, the system will pull that information forward for you as a planner and present it under historical practices, which will support your evaluation of resource concerns. Realizing that we do not have all information stored within NPAD, lots of good conservation has been done by the operators themselves, or maybe we don't have a record of it if we assisted. So we allow observed practices to be added. You click the add practice modal and you can choose practices to add, and I should say practice and narrative combinations. And you can get these from conversations with the client, a field visit. You may have aerial imagery or other records, perhaps like a comprehensive nutrient management plans, things like that, that could aid you in understanding what practices you should add. This is key to add existing practices. This is going to build out that existing condition. One other thing to note here is there is a functional column. If you uncheck the functionality, it allows you to make a comment of why you are removing the functionality of that historical or observed practice. Again, we're doing inventory and evaluation, so it may be good to designate whether a practice like a grass waterway exists out of the landscape, uncheck the functionality, and make a comment that maybe the waterway has met its life expectancy, is silted in, and there's a gully running along both sides of the grass that is existing. So we have a record of it. We realize we have a need to be addressed. Another thing that unchecking functionality does is removes any practice points that would be accounted towards any resource concerns within the assessment. Touching on those points, we have the Conservation Assessment Practice Points database. These are some live links. We'll be providing access to this PowerPoint presentation. So if you want, you can go and look at the spreadsheets. So we have all practice narrative combinations pointed against resource concern components by land use. Another quick tip for you all, if you're in the assessment, or I should say within CART, if you click on the little help button, it will open up, I think it's called help documents, will be a little window that pops up. You click on that and it will take you to SharePoint where this information is housed as well. All right. So here we go, continuing on steps 3 and 4, trying to build that existing condition. We have resource inventory questions. A question we get often is, where do these questions come from? So they are developed by our national discipline leads within science and technology in conjunction with our national planning leads, which houses the conservation planning branch staff like myself, and also subject matter experts from our tech centers, our states, and even sometimes down into area and field level individuals have been involved to pull together this information. We glean information off existing assessment tools to help derive those questions that are presented many times. And then other times we've created the questions to support the analysis ourselves. The configuration of these question and answers is done by our staff within headquarters here on the Conservation Planning Branch. It allows us to update this at any time, which is a very powerful asset for the agency. As science updates or we realize that we have corrections to make, we can do those in-house. As you can imagine, each answer is an analysis of the resource concerns that you associated to those lane units. And within the hover text, we do provide assessment tools that are referenced. Those assessment tools that are referenced are to support new planners that do not have a solid understanding of how to provide the answer otherwise, so they can run those outside assessment tools to be able to correlate to the corresponding answers and know what is the best choice. Work within your state. There may be state guidance on what tools may still actually be required, or who has the authority to answer the questions without running the tools. We leave that up to your states to lead that. But ideally, the reason, one of the main reasons of the assessment being created was to allow those seasoned, experienced planners a way to document quickly and efficiently the current status of resource concerns without the necessity of running those tools all the time. So take advantage of that when allowable. Also within that, if you want to read more about the resource concern inventory questions and answers, we have a document. It's about 200 pages. It's a rather quick read. These table of contents is a hyperlink. So on any of these, you can hover over top of it, hit the control button, and click your mouse, and it'll take you directly to that section. So if there's particular parts that you want to read more in depth into, please go ahead and do that. Again, these are hyperlinks, just like before. The top version is a clean version. If you want to know what changed from the previous fiscal year from FY24 to 25, click this link and you will see a red line version showing you the adjustments. Again, don't forget that help link will take you directly to the SharePoint site, no matter where you are within the assessment. All right, so something new that you saw the first screen here, it is at the bottom, the detailed assessment. We have done software development to allow this capability within the system. Right now, we don't have a use case where it's being actively used, but what it is a more specified evaluation of a resource concern component. So a real great example is terrestrial habitat is what we do within the resource inventory evaluation. But if a state wanted to, they could do one of their wildlife habitat evaluation guides for a particular species. So perhaps sage grouse as an example, they could build out that detailed assessment for the sage grouse. You all within the field could run that analysis to be able to define the quality of that habitat. And then what is really nice is, just like all the other resource concerns that we are evaluating, it's all geospatially tied to those POUs we first created. In my example, that sage grouse WEG would be geospatially tied to the POUs where the evaluation was done. And then we could start to aggregate that information to support further decisions on funding considerations, planning efforts with our partners, being able to report out to those partners on benefits that we've provided for a particular example like the sage grouse, but it could have other applicability as well. We're evaluating possibilities. And the nice thing is it is jurisdictional, meaning that if a particular state wanted to create one of these detailed assessments, it would only be applicable to their state. We can do multi-state detailed assessments as well. And then in the future, or I should say right now, it is state configurable. We will provide a little oversight before a detailed assessment is published. And then lastly, it will remain optional for the user within the field. I would imagine that states would set out some guidance if they didn't want it to be optional and wanted a detailed assessment to always be answered for a particular purpose. But more to come to that when we have real examples, and there will obviously be plenty of training through your state on that when it comes to be, if it happens. So we just worked through steps 1 through 4. Now we have our existing total. So we've moved over to the results page, which is really nice. You can see here the column for existing total. We have our resource concerns broke down by category, resource concern, and components. And then we can see the existing total versus the threshold. If you're not aware, any of these orange triangles, if you hover over top of them, it will let you know which lane units are below the threshold. So if you need to find, if you have, 5, 10 or more lane units and you need to determine which ones are below the threshold so you can take a closer look to make sure you answered everything properly, please hover over those and you can see what lane units. We created some filters within the assessment, so you can filter and just look at a grouping of just all the land use. You can break it down by modifier, and then ultimately you can choose what lane unit to turn on. So we have these filters available to help look through the results for all the information within the assessment. In the future, we hope to build out some additional filters that could help you look for things like the hover text does here. Identify which resource concern components are not met on particular land units. All right, so that moves us on to steps 5, 6, and 7 that are within the assessment, looking at plan practices. There's a lot going on the plan practice page. First and foremost, our sources to determine these is going to be based on your technical expertise and knowledge of your administrative area. You're going to start to make decisions for what conservation practices are best suited to address those resource concerns. Also, we're going to take into consideration our client input, that human consideration, labor that's available, equipment that is available, their financial means to be able to implement one practice over another. Maybe there's cultural situations that need to take place. Maybe it's in an urban setting, so we need to take that into consideration as well. All of those kind of client input, that human consideration is going to come into play as we're formulating our plan practices and making decisions. And we're going to walk through each one of these columns you can see on the plan practice page. But I did want to point out there, just like on the review by practices, we do have ability to review by resource concern. So based on the resource concerns associated it will give you recommendations of what practices could address that resource concern. All right. Priority is a new column that was added to the plan practices last year. This is in an effort to increase our ability to properly track our landscape priorities. So things like bog turtle, sage grouse, lesser prairie chicken, etc. All of these have national landscape priorities. Within CD, you mark what those priorities are. But this is a place, as you're adding the plan practices within CART, you can check the priority this practice is being done for a priority. And when doing that, it creates a little bit of computer software knowledge that's fed back into CD that will provide you a reminder for when you are digitizing that draft practice to make sure you identify a priority. If you want to learn more about that, I got some links up here to a training video and a fact sheet on priority tracking. If you want to just general understanding of where our landscape conservation initiatives are, there's a link here in the bottom right-hand corner. Plan practices, looking at primary and supporting. Just real quick, as far as those cap points go, if its practice is selected primary, it will have the points count towards resource concerns. If it's selected primary and supporting, those practices will points will count. But if only selected supporting, it will remove any influence those practice points have to a particular resource concern component. Again, we have a training video and a fact sheet if you would like. Here's the hyperlinks. On the last page of the fact sheet is this decision tree to help you in the field understand if the practice is primary, supporting, or both. All right, so then once we do the primary and supporting designations, we have to link those practices into a system. This has been very positive in the fact that now, as you all define those conservation systems, we ensure complete funding of those systems. When we first rolled out CART, we had situations where systems were defined, but we didn't have linking capabilities yet, and we were having individual practices picked up and funded by a single ranking pool, but orphaning the entirety of the system. So we're leaving a couple practices left behind, which was not beneficial for implementation nor meeting the client's objectives. So this allows us to define those systems and ensure complete funding. Also with on here, and the last thing I'll touch on with plan practices is seeking funding. If you check the box, what that tells the system is to take these practices and move them forward into the ranking portion of CART for funding consideration. You could build a master plan of plan practices with the client, but maybe again, looking at those human considerations, they only can implement a certain number of those plan practices. So you could turn off the seek funding on some of those practices, leave others turned on that they have the financial means to implement in the next maybe 2-3 years, and move those to ranking. Also note any of the practices that you uncheck for seek funding, those won't have any influence to the ranking points that we will touch on how assessments impact ranking. Don't need to touch on this too much. Again, same cap points for the plan practices as existing. So there's your access. Trying to move along because I'm running a little bit out of time. So plan practice results, again, you'll see the column. Again, you have the hover text. You're allowed to see what land units at a plan condition still fall below the threshold, same filter capabilities. Wanted to do a real quick results walkthrough. So what we have here in front of us is, again, way back when on the slide deck, I showed you the variable threshold for sheet and rill erosion. So in this example, we're going to pick a moderately high and high R factor to get a dynamic threshold of 60. If we were to answer the resource inventory question, the view on the left is from the CART document. This one in the middle is what you see within the user interface within CART. If we pick moderate, that has a point value of 15. As we move on and we go to existing practices, maybe we identified that there's a conservation crop rotation and they're doing some reduced tillage management. That would have a value of 15 for a total of 25. So we built our existing total of 40, which is below the threshold. So we have our existing practice view. This is a view from the CAP database table. And then now we're going to plan some practices. So let's plan some terraces out there on the landscape to help control the sheet and rill erosion. That carries a point value of 30 on cropland. So the point values show up within our results. We've marked it primary, so our points count. We're seeking funding. Gives us a plan total of 70, which is above the threshold. And there's just a quick screen capture of it all together. Overrides is of interest always. We get less than 1% overrides nationwide across all the resource concern components that are evaluated on a fiscal year basis. I think that's due to our maturity in understanding how to work with the system, and you all out there as technical leads providing the answers within CART. But it does need to be done at a single PLU. So you first have to filter down to a single PLU, then you get this actions column. You click on those 3 dots, and then you have an option to override the existing total or override the planned total. And then when you click on either one of these, you get a pop-up modal. It's a little small on the screen, but we'll share the slide deck with you. And there's kind of a 4-step process to do an override. First, you define, you open the modal, then you define your overriding reason why you are doing that. Then you provide us a comment to back up your overriding reason. A lot of times it's good to give us as much detail as possible. This allows us to look at this information and make any adjustments to either the resource inventory question and answer sets, or maybe adjust the values of a conservation practice to address a resource concern. And then after you add in your comment, you click add. You can see at the bottom here, it's rather small, but hopefully large on your computer screens. You can see your comment was added. If you really wanted to, you can add more than one reason. If you want to edit it, or you click on the pencil or the trash can, you can delete it and start over. Once you hit save, that adds the override to the results page. You can either override to a met condition. So here we override the existing total to met because we were below 50. And then you can actually override downward. You can say, I disagree that the condition is met. I believe it is not met. So you can do that as well. Thing to point out is you do not adjust the point values, but this will have impacts on things like the Conservation Stewardship Program when looking at meeting priority resource concern categories at the time of application and at the end of contract. So also point out, some states have oversight on this, so check within your state. Sometimes they like you to work with your area resource conservationist to confirm that they agree with your override before you take that action. Other states have other policies, so just check within your state if they have any oversight that they wish to do. All right, just 2 more slides. So assessment ranking components. So within the ranking portion of CART, we prioritize funding decisions on 5 components. Those 5 components are vulnerability, planned practice effects, and resource concern priorities, program priorities, and efficiency. I'm not going to go into detail on these, but I want you to understand that these 3 of them are coming directly from the assessment. So vulnerability, that's the difference between the threshold and the existing condition. And then it goes through some mathematical equations, percentages that I don't have time to go through, but you can work with your program staff to have that understanding. And then we also have planned practice effects. This is feeding off those CAP points. And then the efficiency, again, is feeding off the CAP, another database that looks at the efficiency of that cost of that practice to address resource concerns. So really takes the information, the hard work you've all done within the assessment, and pulls it forward within ranking. So thank you very much. Keep all your decisions within the assessment driven by those technical decisions. You all as conservation planners, hopefully you're all working towards being certified planners if you aren't currently, but let that be your decision point. Keep it technically driven, and I'm going to turn this over to Jared Kneisel.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Eric, and an awesome job covering all of CART assessment in a 30-minute or so chunk of time. That's tough to do. A lot of information. I know that we're getting questions coming in, which is fantastic, and we'll circle around to getting those answered, maybe in a follow-up thereafter. But anyways, just briefly, I'm Jared Kneisel. I serve as the National Planning Data Steward on the Conservation Planning Branch at headquarters, and again, just want to reassure all the attendees here that the PowerPoint or any other resource that's presented here is going to be available for you to review at your own pace afterwards. It's going to help on all the topics covered here today. And I'm going to say I'm especially going to count on that ability for you to go back and re-review presentation of the CART reports when it gets to that part. So go ahead and go to my first slide, if you would, please, Eric. But before I get to the CART reports, let me first just recover a little bit of the ground that he covered in his CART presentation. specifically CAP. Take another lap through that. So that's the conservation assessment practice points. The primary purpose of the CAP values is to provide a contextual level of benefit that particular practice is expected to provide to a specific resource concern component. And I realize that that's quite a mouthful, but that benefit, it's contextual not just to a specific component, but the values can and do change based upon what narrative you're dealing with, what level of implementation, what land use you're dealing with as well. A little bit of that is shown here on the slide, and chiefly it directly informs that part of that CART assessment, as Eric showed, both on the existing practice side of things and the plan practices as well. Next slide, please, Eric. But that's only true when certain criteria is met. So again, calling back to what Eric showed previously, I'll just recover this. And I've got a snippet of just the plan practice page shown here. If the plan practices are marked as primary, or even primary and supporting, but as long as it's at least primary and it has points that are meeting that combination of land use and narrative and resource concern component, then those points will show up on the results page. Likewise, on the existing practice page, if that practice is marked as functional and has those matching point values, then it's going to show up on the results page as well. And so the flip side of each, probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways. If a practice is marked as not functional, or if it's marked as supporting only, then even if there were points that matched up, 0 is what will translate through to the results page. And there's no sliding scale or anything that you have to figure out. It's an all or nothing system. So you should be able to easily back calculate the points that you are seeing in the results page. Next slide, please, Eric. And speaking of back calculating, again, this was shown, but hitting it again, there's a couple of different resources available to do so. The state data stewards for each state, they can access the CAP grid shown here from CPDES directly, but otherwise for others, we've got an exported Excel copy placed on that national CART SharePoint site, which is also shown in the next couple of slides. I'll try and make up some time here, so go ahead in the next slide, please, Eric. So again, there's that CART SharePoint landing page. Again, if you're in CART and you hit the help, it'll take you here. Probably bookmark this would be a good thing anyways. But if you click on that second tab that I have highlighted there with the red box, then that goes into a couple of different options. Next slide, please, and we'll look at that. So I've got 2 different documents outlined in red boxes here. The top one shown is the clean version, if you will, and it just shows the 2025 values alone. Whereas the second file, I've got a side-by-side comparison of what the 24 CAP values were against what the 25 values are. You can see that in the thumbnail at the bottom of the slide here. And in Excel, you can filter and sort, which I would highly recommend because there's thousands of rows of values to go through otherwise. But also as kind of a visual clue for you, if there was a change from 24 to 25, those are going to be highlighted in yellow, and you can filter off of that as well. And on this particular version, at no additional cost, is there's a tab on the spreadsheet that summarizes what the narrative changes were, or the narratives that were added, unique for fiscal 25. So that's in that version as well. So just a couple of resources as well for you to use. All right, next slide, please. So back to CAP, what it does, it directly informs CART assessment on the CA side. Now that is the primary focus and function of it, but it's also used to varying degrees for other items. Eric covered this, but it contributes to one of the ranking factors. When you get into the plan practice effects on the ranking side of CART, that shows up there. It's also used for a couple of our NRCS KPIs, or key performance indicator goals that we have for the agency. It's also used to kind of determine which practices count towards a couple of those. So KPI 3, which is the conservation applied to reduce soil erosion and improve soil health. KPI 8, conservation applied to conserve water. The practices that either count or don't towards either of those 2 metrics come from the CAP values. Thinking back, as you saw from that comparison spreadsheet on the National CART SharePoint site, CAP values, they're reviewed and updated annually as needed. The other pieces of CART are reviewed and updated as well, and there's a lot that goes into that. Updates to a resource inventory question, it may also have a trickle down of impact on those CAP values, remember, because they're contextual based off of what resource you're talking about. Overrides, Eric covered, and I will put in a plug for those. Overrides, they are a key consideration as well, especially if you put in good justification as to why you feel an override is necessary. We do look at those each year and determine, if we see something that's being overridden on a recurring basis, we'll look into that and determine what course of action may be warranted there. Sometimes that is a CAP value change that's necessary. So I do consider that, if you will. A third bullet, then also CAP, it oftentimes has been compared directly with CPPE, or the Conservation Practice Physical Effects values. And there's definitely some commonality between the two, but there's differences as well. Both will show a benefit that the conservation practice could provide. And CPPE was definitely part of, some of the sources that went into assigning CAP values as well. But there's key differences between the two as well. Again, just think about the role that the CAP does in CART. CART needs to account for different narratives, different land uses, plus CART goes to the more granular level of resource concern component, whereas CPPE sticks at the concern level. But on the flip side, CPPE, it also provides awareness into the potential negative effects that a practice may have with it, and CAP currently doesn't have that as well. But that's a question that we often get, is just, I assume that they should be the same, and they're not always the same, but they are very much related. Next slide, please, Eric. Okay, so now shifting to my other topic here and providing just an overview of the available CART reports. That was the topic requested. And this is where, due to time, I'm probably going to cover these quickly and kind of use the same manner. My slides will have the what, who, and why for each of the reports here. And then again, you can go back to the saved slides and look at them with a longer look if you so desire. But just some general statements to throw out there. Roles and access. If you can get into CD, you can run these reports. If you'd rather have a more step-by-step how-to, again, I encourage you to use the resource there in the user's manual. If you go to section 2.1.2 under CART, you can get into individual report information. And then each of these reports that are exportable to Excel, and that's probably going to be where you're going to have the most usability and value there. Just kind of a final caveat. There's been improvements or changes over time with these reports, and they don't necessarily represent a final product. Even now, we're always open for suggestions or comments on what else is needed for these reports to really meet your needs. So, all right, next slide. So, very quickly, navigating to these reports, very straightforward. If you click on that report icon in the top ribbon as shown on the prior slide, you'll notice that CART is a category unto itself in the table of contents. You can see that here. Next slide, please, Eric. Then if you click on that CART, you're going to see the current list of the 8 reports that we have available. And I'm going to cover each of these in a pretty high level here on the next slides. Now, go ahead, Eric, next one. So starting out, first one, the assessment data by employees. That report does just that. It shows the number of assessments an employee has completed, how many they have ranked, how many were selected for funding, number of overrides, again, touching on that, and that could be useful. But even if you don't want to use it for looking at an individual employee, this could be used to aggregate at the entire service center level instead. And I think you're doing some workload analysis, or maybe performance or planner certification. Those sort of things would be use cases for pulling up this report. But I will throw out there is a big caveat to this one. It is set to be driven by a program you see there in the filter criteria. And so that doesn't include CTA or CRP at the moment. Now this does also enable differentiation and tracking NRCS employee versus affiliate. That might be useful as well. So again, you can see what the filter options are here. I'm going to use that pattern on the following slides as well, and I probably won't call them out for each report, but that is the first one. All right, next slide, please, Eric. Okay, next is the assessment data report. This is a summary of individual CART assessments completed in a service center. You get to see how many land units are in an assessment. You don't get to see things like the resources assessed. You do get to see whether or not an override was performed, archive status. And I think again, looking overrides, it's valuable here, but thinking of this from a workload analysis aspect as well. You can see the land units, and we recognize that not all assessments are equal in terms of size or time it takes to complete. So this could be a metric that you could get out of that. All right, next slide. Next one I want to cover is the assessment resource concern report. Now we're starting to get into a little larger reports. Being named the resource concerns report, you can dig into any of the 3 tiers of resources. We've got categories, concerns, and components. But also useful here, you can search by an individual practice, or you can set this up for a certain suite of practices, and that would be useful. I'd say one item lacking, I believe, in the report's value is you don't get to see what practice narrative is being used. So again, these reports open for improvements yet, and perhaps that is something that would be a helpful addition. But part of the contents of the data returned is we do get to see ranking pool information through this one, application information, including some cost estimates, estimated and actual costs through here. Next report, next slide. Next up, assessment status report. And really this one, pretty light, straightforward report. It'll show whether your assessments are in what status: assessed, discarded in assessment, ranked, selected, what have you. I think perhaps the value here is again looking at a workload analysis, and if I was a work unit manager, I could keep tabs on how the assessments in my work unit are coming along. And I'll point out that this is really focused on the CA side of CART. You don't see a whole lot into any ranking information. Yeah, you can see if the overall assessment was in ranked or selected status, but there's really no FA information that comes in with that. But I will say that this particular report, unlike the assessment data by employee, the first one I covered, this one does include the ability to get things that are CTA only or CRP because there isn't that program focus on this particular one. So consider that. Next slide, please. Alrighty, National Assessment Data Report. This is one I'll cover especially quickly because its use or its access is limited to those that has a national role to it. But just for awareness that there is summary level data out there that can be pulled and provided, which gives you maybe counts at a larger scale than what some other reports do. Plus, this one has a few interesting metrics within it, such as the number of resource concerns per land unit, average assessment size, it's interesting, how many ranking pools there are, how many ranked assessments, things like that. So this one's just more of an awareness of there's lots of data out there that could be gathered. All right, Eric, next slide. All right, hang in there, folks. Got just a couple more of these report slides to go. Now kind of shifting gears and looking at some of the ranking things. The focus here is obviously about ranking pools, the status, number of ranked assessments, and also all down to a service center. Thinking especially useful for a program manager, certainly. You know, if you approach the end of the year and you want to do an analysis to see how used a certain ranking pool was or not used. But also, again, thinking about that work unit manager, if you were to pair this report up with, say, the assessment status report mentioned earlier, you could keep tabs on the planning and ranking progress throughout the year in your work unit. Next slide. All righty. Aside from the ranking pool summary report, there's also the ranking status report. Now this one is built from a single program focus and then filtered on down from there. Gets into more details. You can see the assessments that were linked to a pool. and that will allow you to see the ranking score, estimated and actual cost, Protrax's status, shown as the application status in the report, and again, certainly another report that would be useful for program analysis and tracking there. Next slide. All right, if you were following along with me here in CD, you'll notice I went a little out of order in covering these, and I skipped over the assessment outcomes report until now. Purposely covering this one last because it's the largest, most comprehensive CART report that we have within CD. And really my recommendation here is that you use the other reports first, probably to kind of narrow down what it is that you're after. Now this report has undergone some significant performance improvements over this last year, and it runs far quicker than it has before. But just do be aware that if you try to download all of your state's information in one go, it may time out on you, or you may have a difficult time exporting it into Excel. So just encouraging you to have a good idea of what one thing or two things it is that you're looking for, so that you can kind of fine tune this one. Breaking all of the rules of what makes an effective PowerPoint slide. Apologize, but if you look at the far right hand side of this screen, you will see a listing of all the different columns of data that gets pulled back in this particular report, just pointing out that that there's a lot that goes into this. So that's good. We need to have all of that available, but that also means that if you're not careful, you could kind of overestimate some of the summaries here. So again, if any of these two column headings would be different, it's going to create a new row. And so just one quick example, and then I'll wrap up. Let's say you want to take a look at how many cropland assessment acres has a particular service center done. You can set that up in Excel, filter it to cropland, and we've got that acres column. You can't just simply take a quick total of that, because if a field has more than one practice on it, that same 80-acre field will be counted on two different rows. So if you do a quick sum, it'll be 160 acres when really 80 is the right answer. So just keep that in mind. Be careful about how you're treating some of that. I hope that makes sense. But I do want to point out, of all the reports, this is likely the one that will be your most often and used and go-to CART report, just because of how much information it has. All right, next slide, please. I think I'm about done. Speaking of the other reports, to narrow down what you want, I've shared this super simple crosswalk a time or two before, just a basic snapshot comparison of the various reports, what they contain, hoping that this could save you some time to open up the right report instead of hunting for some information. So for example, briefly, if you want to find override information, any of the 4 reports with the green in the far right column would get you there. If you're looking for practice specific info, then either the outcomes or resource concern report and so on. So again, this slide will be available to you. All right, next slide, and this will be the last one for me. Just touching on that there are a few CART reports that are actually within the CART application itself and not within CD. So get to any of these by going within an individual assessment, and if you're far enough along, they'll all be available to you. I won't spend too much time talking about this, but in the next week or 10 days, we should be seeing some improvements and automations, especially to the CSP reports, an effort where you won't have to manually edit and set what the state priority resource categories are and the associated questions. That'll be automated, but look for more of that in the next release notes. Excited about that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this overview, turn it over to Jason Nemechek to discuss soils data and resources. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared. My name is Jason Nemechek. I'm the National Soil Data Application Scientist for Soils and Plant Science Division. This section I'll be briefly going over how soils data is being used for CART. Our soils data has been integral to helping address resource concerns, and most of the resource concerns are influenced by some aspects of soils data. It's essentially interweaved throughout the whole system of CART assessments. We've built soils information into CART to help streamline planning efforts utilizing soil properties and interpretations for CART assessments, environmental evaluations, and easements. For most of CART assessment, it is ranked by the dominant critical method, while some water quality assessments use an area weighted average. The dominant critical assessment algorithms flag the single most limiting rating for the planned land unit that comprises of at least 10% by area or 10 acres or 20% when less than 20 acres. Since the advent of CART, we've been able to swiftly integrate soils data into conservation planning and ranking. This aligns well with the concepts of resource concerns and the limitation or assumptions that CART uses. CART soils assessments operate on the most limiting factor assumption for conservation treatment needs, identifying high-risk fields where a significant extent of the planned land unit has a limiting factor for the evaluated resource concern. Meaning, if a field that is 90% flat and 10% of it is very steep terrain, we plan for the risk, the 10%. This is essentially what the soils algorithm is doing. Next slide. I'll be going quickly over how soils data is being processed within CART. First, the request of soils data begins once the planned land unit has been selected. Second, CART will automatically send a request to a soil web service called Soil Data Access. Third, soil algorithms are processed in the background on a soil service, and the assessment rating gets streamed back into CART. Next slide. I just want to quickly show a spatial visualization of how it looks. The map on the left shows 8 different soil map units with the land unit. The map on the right illustrates the risk of high surface salt concentration. The red is high risk, yellow is moderate, and the green is low risk. For this exercise, let's assume the land unit is greater than 20 acres and the high rating is greater than 10% of the area. Next slide. If the planner selects this resource concern component for assessment, a soil services assessment analyzes the surface salt concentration interpretation. This service request calculates the rolling sum values for the rating acres and the rating percent for each resource concern, and the fields finds the single most limiting rating that comprises of at least 10% by area or 10 acres or 20% when it's less than 20 acres. Next, the threshold value based on the web service will be set to determine the table. In our example, the land unit gets flagged and the threshold value is 50. The goal is to decide, based on the level of risk, how much conservation effort is needed for it to be sustainable. The example I used, I'm breaking the section down to the simplest form. I should also note that there's a lot of science that goes into building each soils interpretation and the properties. In addition, not only building soils interpretations, it's important to note that there's also a science of how data gets aggregated correctly as well. This helps get the best out of the soils data and how to work within CART. A good soils interpretation takes a lot of time and collaboration to build. Next slide. And I'll be turning it over to Teresa next.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Teresa Harrington, a natural resource specialist with Mission Delivery Optimization. And I have a recorded demo showing how to create soils, maps, and reports in CD. Eric, if you want to go ahead and play the demo whenever you're ready. Today, I will be to create a soils map and report in Conservation Desktop. This information can also be found in the CD CART lesson plans, and the lesson plan number is 16.5. There are 2 main parts to this process. The first will be using the soil map and inventory tool to create a temporary soil layer that's clipped to selected land units. And then the second part will be using conservation products to generate the soils map and reports. To begin with, I have a case file open, and I have the National Soils layer marked available in my layer preferences. I'm going to start by turning on that National Soils map service. To do that, from the center toolbar, open Map Contents, and in the Map Contents window, scroll down to locate the Soils layer, and check it to make that visible on the map. If you do first need to make this layer available in your layer preferences, it can be found under the soils category. We can close map contents, and next we'll create the clipped soils layer. The soil map and inventory tool can be found in the CD table of contents under the case file. We'll select that and your dialog window will open. The first step is to select the source layer, and you'll see that there are several options. You can clip the soils to selected land units from any of these layers, so it does not require a practice schedule. However, for this example, we're going to select the practice schedule PLUs. Next, enter a name for the temporary output layer. I'm going to call it soil demo. And the final step is to select land units from the source layer. You can do that either by clicking on the map. You can select a single feature, draw a box to select multiple features, or you can use the select all link on the dialog window. With either of those methods, if you select multiple land units, you'll see a pop-up window to refine or confirm your selection. Here I want to select all PLUs, so I will click on the first land unit in the list, hold the Shift key and click on the last to select all, and then click the OK button. So you can see that that selected all of the land units in our practice schedule, and we can see those listed in the main window. If everything looks correct, we can select Create. And once that's finished, you should see a message to let you know that the soils layer was successfully created and added to the map. We can now close the soil map and inventory layer window. And to view the clipped soil layer, we'll go back into map contents. Here we have our soil demo layer is now checked, and let's uncheck the national soils layer so that you can see the clipped layer on the map screen. There are options to change the symbology for the soils layer. That can be found by selecting the gear icon. That will open the style changer. You can select the symbol that displays best with your active base map. And in this example, the background is fairly dark. So I'm going to select the lightest setting and then click Apply. After that's done, you can close the style changer and close map contents. Now we're ready to open conservation products and to create the soil map and reports. Again, that's found in the CD table of contents under the case file. Select conservation products. On the first screen for the product type, we'll select soils map and report, and then select next. The next couple of screens should look familiar if you've worked with other map products in Conservation Desktop. Well, the first is the map heading screen, where you can select which items you want to include in the map header. We'll select the map title, client, state and county, service center, and date. There's an option to save your selections so that the next time you come back, you can load saved preferences. Select next, and that'll take us to the layout and scale screen. Here we have options for the page size, orientation, and the map scale. For the page size, we'll leave it as 8.5 by 11. Scrolling down, it looks like our land units would work best with the portrait setting. Depending on how your land units are oriented, it might make sense to change the page size to landscape. And for the map scale, our current scale is approximately 1 to 18,000. You can see the orange box that roughly shows the area that will be included on the map. I think we could zoom in a little closer. So I'm going to select the ratio map scale and we'll try 1 to 12,000 and see how that looks. Scrolling down, again, we see the orange box that shows the area that will be included on the map. So it looks like all of our land units and labels will fit in that area, and everything is fairly centered. I think that looks good, and then we can click next. Let's move to the final screen. This is the options screen, which has selections specific to the soils map and reports. Here you can select the soil layer to use for the map and report. And then this screen also includes the location-specific map header information, which allows you to quickly create multiple soils maps. For example, if you're creating maps by tract without needing to return to the map heading screen. So you can update this information right from the last page and then create multiple maps as you adjust the extent. We'll start off selecting our soils layer. Next, we have our report options. There are 2 available reports. The map unit description report is checked by default. The report that you can include is the soils inventory report, and I'll select that for this example. Moving over, we have the option to enter a custom report subtitle. If you wish to use this, that text would be added to the report header pages. And the last selection, when the soils inventory report is selected, you'll need to choose how you want that report to be summarized. The default is by tract and land unit, and there's also an option to summarize by land use. For this example, we'll leave the default, scroll down and select create. In the pop-up window, enter a file name and then select create. And the new file will be displayed on the conservation products list. The status column will show this as processing. Since we're creating a map, it will probably take about 2 minutes to process. For the sake of time, I'm going to pause the recording and come back once it's finished. The status is now complete, and we can select actions and preview to open the file. Reviewing the PDF file, you'll first see the soils map, and that'll be followed by the selected reports. The map unit description report shows the brief description of the soils that occur in that clipped layer. This is fairly lengthy, so we'll scroll through that, and then that's followed by the soils inventory report. Again, since we selected this summarized by tract and land unit, the report shows the soils present for each land unit. And remember, there is also an option to summarize by land use. We'll close the PDF. Similar to other conservation products, there's also an option to upload this file to DMS. From Actions, Upload to DMS. That opens the upload page, and because I have a practice schedule open, it will pre-populate with information from that practice schedule. You can review this information, and if everything looks correct, I believe we don't need to enter or select anything, but we can just click upload. And once that's done, we'll get a confirmation message. And at this point, we can close conservation products. I have one more item to show in CD. That is how to export land units to a shape file. And this will lead into the next demonstration. where you'll see how to import that shapefile into Web Soil Survey to find additional soils information. I'll just note that exporting land units to a shapefile is covered in lesson plan number 20.1. First step is to open map contents, and we want to select or highlight the layer that we're exporting from. In this example, it will be practice schedule PLUs. Then we're going to get the select tool from the center toolbar. It's this arrow, and select one or more features from the map. So again, we can single click to select a single feature to export, or as in this example, we want to select all. So I'll click and drag to draw a box and then select all the land units in that pop-up window. Click OK. Once you have your features selected, and you can see here that they're highlighted on the map, we'll go back to map contents and right click on that selected layer and select export selected. The export features dialog will open, and it shows that we are exporting 6 features to a shapefile. The shapefile name defaults to the export layer name, and you can change this if you would like or leave the default, and we'll select export. Once the file is ready, you will get a link to download the file. So we'll click on that download shapefile hyperlink. And then you should see some prompts from your browser to save that file. So here we'll select save. I think by default it'll put it in my downloads folder. Let's click the folder to open that up. So here's our downloaded file. The export will be saved as a compressed zip file that contains our shapefile. If I double click on that, you can see that here. And then after your file is downloaded, you can close the export features dialog. This ends the CD soil map and report demo. Next, you'll see how to import that shapefile into Web Soil Survey. Today, I will be showing how to. And next, we'll hear from Jason again on how to create soil maps and reports in Web Soil Survey.
Thank you, Teresa. I also have a recorded demo for Web Soil Survey. I just want to kind of quickly go over some numbers with some metrics with Web Soil Survey. If you can see on the left, Web Soil Survey has like it's being used 4 million times, and Soil Data Access has been, the numbers keep on going up each year, which is last year was 116 million. And if we go to the next slide, we can go to the recorded demo. Today, I'll be going over a quick tutorial of how to import a shapefile into Web Soil Survey that was exported from Conservation Desktop. First, I want to highlight a few features about Web Soil Survey and how it's useful for conservation planning. Web Soil Survey offers several valuable features such as interactive mapping tools that allow you to define and manipulate your area of interest easily. It also provides comprehensive soils data, allowing access to various soil properties, soils interpretations that include suitabilities or limitation information. You can also generate detailed, customized soils report tailored to your area of interests. Also, ecological site description section delivers in-depth descriptions for targeted ecological sites, which we'll be using as our example today. In addition, it's important to understand and utilize soils data. It's crucial for effective conservation management. Comprehensive soils information helps you making informed decisions about land use, conservation practices, and ecological management. It ensures that the right conservation practices are implemented in the right places, ultimately promoting sustainable land use and environmental health. To begin using Web Soil Survey, click on the green Start WSS button located here to initiate your session. The first step is defining your area of interest. There's several ways to define your area of interest and navigate to specific areas. One way is using the mapping tools located here. You can zoom in on your specific area. You can draw the AOI polygon or AOI rectangle on the map. It's limited by 100,000 acres. You can also use the quick navigation located here. You can use it to more effectively filter through areas in the United States, Hawaii, Alaska, and the territories. For our demonstration today, we'll be using the import AOI. There's two ways to do so. One way is create AOI from shapefile. Another is create AOI from zip shapefile. This is the preferred method. The first method, you have to select each individual file, where here you can just select one file. Now let's go to select the file that we've exported for Conservation Desktop. Let's choose our file. Select the file that we've exported. Click open. And now let's set our AOI. Now you can see here it's pretty easy. We've created our AOI. Now we can go and select, explore the soils information. First, we can select the soils map. As you can see here, here's a detailed soils map. On the left side, you can see that this is the dominant map unit for area of interest. If you click on the links provide a map unit's description for each map unit for your area of interest. You can click on the Soil Data Explorer for additional soils information for all the soils about your AOI. The Intro to Soil section provides a overview of fundamental properties. It's a great starting point to understand basic characteristics and classifications of the soils. Suitabilities and limitations. This section's soils interpretation thematic maps. The soil properties and quality section. This section offers information about the physical and chemical properties of soil, such as texture, structure, nutrient content. Understanding these properties is essential for making informed decisions. Here's the soils report section. This is pretty comprehensive of soils interpretations and soil properties all in one place. Now we can go by and select the ecological sites tab. Let's click on the view all ecological site information. As you can see here is the thematic map of all the ecological sites. I'm going to click here and click identify. I'm going to select the individual polygon for a map unit. So you can see the map unit name, even the ecological site name. If I could scroll down a little bit more, there's a percent area AOI. There's the map unit symbol. Right over here is links to the ecosystem dynamics interpretive tool called Edit. This is where you can provides more detail about ecological sites. I can scroll up, add this to my shopping cart. As you're click OK. As you're gathering data and reports from Web Soil Survey, you can add them, keep on adding them to your shopping cart for easy access. You can add different desired data or reports. Once you've added all the necessary items, you can kind of scroll up with the shopping carts tab. It's on the left, you can see everything that you've added to your report, and then you can click checkout, click OK, get report now. This takes a second to load. Once it's loaded, it provides a PDF, a comprehensive report of everything that you've added to your shopping cart. It provides everything at your fingertips. So this is a quick summary of Web Soil Survey and how you export a shapefile from Conservation Desktop and importing it into Web Soil Survey. Thank you.
Jason, I think you're up again, real quick.
All right, well, thank you. This section, I'm just going to go over a couple future enhancements for CART and Conservation Desktop, as well as some products from the Dynamic Soils Hub. I just want to briefly mention a few couple enhancements in CART and Conservation Desktop, as well as developments on the soil side to better support conservation efforts. The first item I want to briefly go over is the request for technical assistance button. I'm just using this as an example, but if there's a need for an on-site investigation, a request or assistance can be sent to the state soil scientist, who could then redirect it to the resource soil scientist or soil survey office. This enhancement would help with efficiencies in communication. Instead of spending time trying to figure out who to contact, users can quickly and easily send a request through a single button. This streamlines the process and saves valuable time. All requests would also get funneled through one system, reducing the chances of miscommunication or lost requests. This ensures all requests are tracked and managed efficiently. The next item is an enhancement to Conservation Desktop, and consider the process of importing a shapefile from Web Soil Survey. And you have to go through all the trouble to be able to export it from Conservation Desktop. Imagine if everything that you just did manually was in from Web Soil Survey into Conservation Desktop. Essentially, all the data from Web Soil Survey can be seamlessly streamed into Conservation Desktop. And finally, I want to discuss new tools that we're developing to help you make better informed decisions. We want to build on tremendous value of using your feedback and new technology to make use of soils data even better. These technologies coming from the Dynamic Soils Hub and eventually integrated into CART and CD. Our aim is to improve your workflows and make your lives easier. We've been actively listening to your suggestions and striving to build tools that save you time and effort. We understand that everyone's busy and there's never enough time. So our goal is to create solutions that truly support your hard work, which I would be highlighting in the next couple slides. Next. Though the hub is not ready for prime time, as we're working to develop some really innovation products. And what I want to say here is not about the hub, and it's not how the hub works. It's what it does. Our aim is to provide better models and to help make better informed decisions by offering comprehensive and innovative information. Everything is interconnected, enhancing our ability to give farmers better explanations and information. This ensures that the right conservation practices are applied in the right places and giving you all the tools at your fingertips to help conservation on the ground. Next slide. This is just a quick breakdown of how we provide a flow path of a model. I just wanted to kind of show kind of example how it would be easy. You just go on to the next slide. This is the ultimate goal for our planners, to help make better planning decisions. Our goal is to help build tools and apps that can help put everything into one place. And for what I'm showing here on the screen is things to come. It's been a collaborative effort that has been working towards building bridges instead of silos. The collaboration on this tool has been fantastic, and I greatly appreciate the partnership and the development that it took to get here. Lastly, I just wanted to add, if you want to know more about this, we're happy to help and talk about it. A soil scientist is ready to assist, and we're happy to help. Our job is to help you do your job better, and we're happy to do that. Reach out to a local soil scientist, a state soil scientist, GIS specialist, or other technical disciplines. We're here to help support you and help put better conservation on the ground. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Christy for Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you. That was a lot that we covered. I know we probably went pretty quick on some of that, so I appreciate the presenters for staying in their time box. So we'd have a few minutes for Q&A. So we do have a few questions that we're prepared to ask live. So the first two are going to be for Eric. The first one is, so do we want to be above or below the threshold to increase the chance of being picked for funding?
Oh, Eric, just breaking in. If you're speaking, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. My apologies. So thank you for the question. really, when you're looking at the assessment, we need to provide the evaluation of the resource concerns solely on a technical basis. So create that existing condition by taking credit for the existing practices that are truly out there on the landscape, and answer those resource inventory questions appropriately to accurately identify the current state of those resource concerns. To directly answer your question, depending on the program, being above or below can have influence on the outcome, but really just keep it technical of the assessment and let ranking be ranking. That way there is no disparate treatment between customers if we all treat them equally at a technical evaluation.
Thank you, Eric. The next question for you is, how does CART's assessment of resource concerns follow the National Resource Concerns and Planning Criteria Handbook, if at all? I have been finding that I can often see a resource concern with my naked eye, assess it with the tools listed in the book, but find that CART does not find it.
Yeah, another great question, and thank you for that question. So the CART assessment is built off of that national instruction that lists the resource concerns and the planning criteria. Within that same national instruction, you'll see references to the planning or assessment tools. Within the CART assessment, we have created down to resource concern components to further the analysis of things like nutrient loss. We know that we can have nitrogen loss and phosphorus loss as an example, so we broke those out into components because it takes an additional analysis of that each situation, the nitrogen and phosphorus loss, to be able to truly quantify the situation going on in the landscape. But it ultimately rolls back up to that resource concern that you would see in that national instruction. As mentioned in my presentation, we do reference those assessment tools that are mentioned in that national instruction to have a correlation between the answer sets in that resource inventory section of CART and those traditional tools if the planner needs that. You mentioned that CART cannot find resource concerns that you are seeing with the naked eye or using assessment tools. CART does not itself associate resource concerns to a planning lane unit. You as the user, as a planner, need to make that association of the resource concern component to the PLU, which would then trigger the analysis of the impact of the existing practices and plan practices against that resource concern component, and also provide to you the ability to input in the resource inventory the appropriate answers to set that existing condition of that resource concern. So thank you for those questions.
Thank you, Eric. The next couple of questions are for Jared. The first one is concerning the assessment data by employee report, and that's the CART assessment data by employee. When is the employee's name captured? Is it the employee who created the CART assessment or the employee who moved it from assessment to in assessment to assessed? So the status is on the assessment.
Yeah, got it. Thanks for the question, and whoever asked it kind of answered it as well. So it depends on the life cycle of that assessment. So by default, it's going to capture and associate the user that initiated or created that assessment. But if that assessment is updated, the status is modified later on, then that'll be captured. The linked employee would go to that, just kind of recognizing how states have different workflows there, and maybe one person is creating them on behalf of the whole office, but then others pitch in and do the work later on. It will update to that to a point. I know in earlier years we saw where maybe pre-approval funding decisions were being made, and then the state program manager or whoever was making the funding decision would get associated with that, and that should no longer be the case. But it should be either the initiator or who last modified the status of that particular assessment being associated with it.
All right, thank you, Jared. And we have just 1 minute left. Okay. We are going to answer all the questions, and we've had more come in than we had time for, so I apologize. We're probably not going to be able to answer any more live. But just wanted to say thank you for attending today's forum, to all the presenters for sharing the deeper dive into CART assessment, the soils data and report. I will be emailing a feedback form to all the participants to provide your feedback to us, as well as suggestions for future CD CART improvements. We are also sharing the slides, videos, questions and answers on the We Are NRCS SharePoint site, and then the partners will be sharing those out through their communication channels. Just want to let you know that hope you can join for the next forum, which is going to be March the 19th, where we're going to cover geospatial practice and land unit editing, as well as how to use the land unit reports. Until then, thank you and have a great day. All right. Bye, everybody.